Okay, we'll start the class now. Can you hear me, all of you?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. Okay, so we'll continue with the introduction part. Hopefully, this would be the last class on introduction. So, I'm revisiting the structure of a compiler. There is a lexical analysis phase, there is a parsing phase, there is a semantic analysis phase. We have talked briefly about some of these. Uh, the 3A part is essentially a part of semantic analysis, but for a particular compiler, we'll term it as intermediate code generator because that is the main objective of this phase inside a compiler, even though the phase has a generic name as semantic analysis. Then we have optimization, code generation, but then you have to remember that in all phases, something else is also present. One is the symbol table. I think all of you know what is a symbol table. At least you have some uh, vague concept. We'll learn about it in more detail in this particular course. And then we have error handlers. So at every phase in the compiler, errors might creep in. So how to handle such errors? So that is something we'll discuss a little bit if possible. Okay, we'll revisit the interpreter's concept again. So what is the target of an interpreter? The target of an interpreter is, so target of a compiler is basically to generate a target program which is written in machine language from a high level language. So you have written a program in high level language and you are generating a target program which is in a low level language like a machine language. In case of interpreter, this is slightly different. The target is not to generate a program, but perform the operations implied by the source program. So you are basically executing as if one line after another in your program. And generally, most of the statements, in fact, all the statements in your program do only two things. Either it does some kind of an arithmetic operation or it does some kind of a uh, comparison operation or logical operation. Okay, so interpreter essentially performs this computation on a source line by source line basis. So it does not generate a target program, but executes the program, you can say, line by line. And you have already seen many interpreters, like for example, basic interpreter, some of you might have seen. Many of you are familiar with Python, and there are some good interpreters with Python as well. For example, if you have a statement like this, position is assigned the value initial plus rate into 60. And if you run through an interpreter, it will uh, compute the value of position using the operations specified by this particular statement. Achha. Lexical analyzer. Let's look into a little bit more detail, although we'll start a little bit more detail on lexical analyzer after the Puja vacation. So it basically reads the characters in the source program, groups them into a stream of tokens. So this phase is responsible for tokenizing your program. I think all of you know how you can tokenize a string, right? Any of you can tell me, if I give you a string which consists of, say, multiple words delimited by space, what should you do in C? Like I give you, the name is AC Sir. So how will you find out what are the tokens in C? Can you tell me?
So can you repeat?
Yeah. Suppose I give you any string. This class is taken by AC Sir. Okay. So you want to find out what are the tokens inside. How will you do that? Like if I give you a C program.
I will basically delete all space and the
Okay,
character.
fine. So you basically do a search inside the string and you find out if there is a space, then you extract the characters which is before that, basically the substring before that, and print it out, right? Yes, that is one very inefficient way of doing it. What is a more efficient way of doing it? Any of you use the function strtok in C? Or tokenizer class in Java? Any of you?
Yes, sir. STST, okay, it returns the character pointer of.
Which one have you used? The Java tokenizer class or
No,
the
sir.
str?
STRT, okay, see.
Correct, correct. Thank you, Aditi. Yes, strtok function is a very important function. Okay, thanks, Mamtu. I don't know Python, so thanks for giving me the information. So Mamtu says is not split. So that's basically the idea. In C, the famous function is strtok. It's a little difficult to use because it has some peculiarity. So yeah, if you pass the string and a delimiting character, it returns the substring up to that delimiter. And next time you call it again, it gives you the second part like this. So basically, strtok, as the name suggests, it basically tokenizes a given string. Very similar thing happens in the lexical analyzer of a compiler. It groups them into a stream of tokens. But here, it's not as simple as looking for a delimiting character. It's basically looking for a pattern, which is, as you have already understood, basically a regular expression. So regular languages, regular grammars, regular expressions, I think all of you are familiar with those terms. So once you have a regular expression, then you can easily use that to tokenize a given program. Means you are basically separating out the words which are meaningful to the program. Now, how you do that? That is what Flex does. We have briefly seen that in our lab class. So Flex is nothing but a program which accepts regular expression patterns. And then if you give as input any file which consists of words following that regular expression pattern, then Flex will be able to tokenize that. That means it will be able to extract those words. So it is a very very much convenience for all of us. So what are the tokens? As you know from C language definition, what are the tokens? The tokens are basically identifiers, keywords, operators. These are all tokens. Of course, delimiting characters are also tokens like semicolon, curly braces. Okay. Now, please note three important terms here: pattern, token, and lexeme. This is a common question in compiler. I think you will get at least 2-3 marks for this. What is pattern? What is lexeme? And what is a token? So basically, tokens are very specified things, like it could be identifier, keyword, operator, etc. So by token, you generically specify what type of thing it is. Is it an identifier? Is it a keyword? Is it an operator? Is it a delimiting character, like this? But the character sequence forming a token is called lexeme. So for example, ABCDE, it's an identifier, you can say, in C. So once the lexical analyzer looks at ABCDE, that word, it will say, okay, this is a token of type identifier. Okay. And what is the lexeme for this identifier? The lexeme is ABCDE. It is the character sequence which forms the token. Am I clear? And the corresponding token may be something you have defined in your regular expression, like ID. So once we do some Flex programs, this will be more obvious. Now, question is, what is pattern? Any of you can tell me what is a pattern? What is the difference between a pattern and a lexeme, for example? Any of you are familiar with regular expressions, syntax of regular expressions? Those who are Python programmers should know or might know. Any
Sir,
answer?
I'm familiar with the syntax in JavaScript. We write everything in square brackets.
Correct, Aditi, and that is not specific to JavaScript only. Okay, the regular expression notation was developed long time back, and what you see as square bracket, as Aditi said, Aditi has seen it, and you will see that in Flex class. It looks something like, so suppose you want to say it consists of multiple alphabetical characters.
Yeah,
Small
rules
characters. So what should I
according to which the string
yeah,
will be.
what should I write? I should write A, comma B, comma C, comma D, blah blah blah, or you can say A dot dot say Z, all in lowercase, and if you give them in square bracket, that becomes the regular expression. So you can easily use regular expression notation. What are the regular expression notations? You have learned it
One
in
can be caret, which we use for not.
correct.
String should not be. And
There is something
as
called plus, right?
yes, sir.
Plus is
And
for what?
plus is for basically when we use something like a car's number plate, like first two will be some alphabets, and
No,
then
you
it
don't
will
have to. You don't have to remember syntax from Python. I mean, you can just remember.
Basically, it's the concatenation.
No, plus is not concatenation in regular expression. Plus means repeating one or more times, right? That is what regular expression is. I mean, you have read it in Automata. So those things are there. So it's a combination of a little bit of different syntax plus what you have learned in Automata as regular expressions. So star means 0 or more occurrence. Plus means 1 or more occurrence. And instead of those curly braces which you use in Automata, we use square brackets. Okay. So these are the only distinctions. Everything else is exactly what you have learned in regular languages and finite automata. I mean, absolutely same thing. Okay. Question mark for 0 or 1 occurrence, like that. We'll come to the syntax, not a problem, don't worry. So that is basically what is a pattern. So if you say my pattern is A dot dot Z plus, that means it can contain one or more lowercase characters of the alphabet. Okay. So ABC is there, ABCD is there, BCD is there. The pattern is only one, but it can generate infinite number of lexemes, right? And each of them is a type of a token.
Now, lexeme, please may you give one example of lexemes?
Let me see if I have here or not. Yeah. For example, here you can see the statement position is assigned the value initial plus rate start 60. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So what is the token here? There are
The plus operator is token.
Plus operator is a token.
The
Star
into operator is
everything
token.
is token. Yeah, here what they have done is only identified the identifiers. Okay, as you can see, position is an identifier, initial is an identifier, rate is an identifier.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so these are basically the tokens. Position, initial, rate, these are tokens of type identifier.
Yes, sir.
Now, what is the lexeme for first identifier ID1? It is POSITION. This stream of characters produce the ID1. So this is basically the lexeme corresponding to ID1. Okay.
Okay, sir. Means the first identifier lexeme is this.
Right.
So, sir, here I had another doubt that, sir, what is it then? There is no difference between a lexeme and identifier. But, sir,
No, there is a
position is the identifier, so it is also a lexeme.
No, that's what I'm saying. For every identifier, there are infinite number of lexemes. I mean, sorry, for every identifier, there is only one lexeme. But you can see that once you have passed this statement or sentence through the lexical analyzer, it gives you only the identifiers, not the lexemes anymore. So it is ID is assigned the value ID plus ID into 60. I have given 1, 2, and 3 to distinguish between them, but in real life, the compiler will not show you that thing. Okay. So it
So
will
sir,
show you.
here position initial rate into 60, all are total are lexeme.
No. For initial, the lexeme is initial.
Yes,
The
sir.
corresponding token is ID. Okay. For rate, the lexeme is rate, but the corresponding token is ID again. Okay. So tokens are same, but you can see the lexemes vary.
But lexeme cannot be a numerical value.
No, it can be. That also is possible. Okay. So
It can
60 is
be.
also a lexeme. Yeah. You can say 60 is a number. I mean, number is consisting of one or more digits. So that is basically the pattern, and this is basically your lexeme. Okay. You
So
can
what is
see
pattern
that-
here? Can we?
Which one?
So what is pattern here?
Yeah, pattern is not shown here. Pattern for ID. ID is the token. The corresponding pattern is A through Z. You repeat it one or more times. So your regular expression is A through Z. Let me see if I can show you that. What does it mean? That it can consist of alphabetical characters in small caps, or in small case, repeated one or more times. Okay. So position is matching this pattern. So ID is the token. The corresponding pattern is A through Z occurring one or more times. And what is the lexeme? Lexeme is the actual character sequence. Okay. Like for example, position is the lexeme for first identifier. Did you get the distinction clearly?
Yes, sir. Okay.
Okay. So similarly, you can say number consists of, so if you say number, NUM is nothing but 0.9 occurring one or more times. Okay. This is the pattern. So you can have a number token defined, num token defined. Okay. Now, if you have 60, it matches a num token. So it will be tokenized into a num. The corresponding lexeme will be 60. And the pattern is nothing but 0 through 9 repeated one or more times. So these are the distinctions. Simple, but a lot of people get confused.
Sir, is the task of a lexical analyzer to separate identifier tokens, etc.?
Yeah, exactly. That's what it is. Okay. So if you look at the slides.
For example, sir, if there is A plus B, so it will lexical analysis will be separate all those.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, that is what it starts is. Groups the source program, input source program into a stream of tokens. Nothing else. So what you get as output is nothing but as you can see here, the output of this lexical analyzer is a stream of tokens. What are the stream? Identifiers, numbers, and operators. Okay. That's it. Clear? Now, how it does it, we are going to discuss a little bit more detail in one of the next classes. But I think you already know how to identify a regular expression, how to recognize whether a particular language belongs to a particular regular language or not. Who can tell me how to do that very briefly? Somebody else apart from Pranay or Mamtu or Aditi for that matter. Who can tell me? Give me some insight. How will you recognize whether a particular string is part of a regular language or not? Or whether a particular regular expression is there or not, which matches that particular string? Who will tell me? You have learned it in detail in Automata class. Yes?
Sir, it can be the subset of the actual question or the actual form. Or we
Actual?
can- Sir, the actual question. I mean, the form it is given.
No, my question is simpler. How will you identify whether a particular string, take the example of a string, whether it belongs to a regular language or not? That means it is generated by any regular expression or not. How will you determine that? What is the way to do it? There is only one
Using
way.
something
Building the automata.
Yes, absolutely, Shayantan. Yes, Aditi, pumping lemma is a little different. Pumping lemma identifies whether it is regular or non-regular. I am asking you a different question. Yes, I admit it is a regular expression. It is a language which belongs to, it is a string which belongs to a regular language or is actually generated by a regular expression. You have to identify which one is that. Okay. So basically what Shantan said is that, yes, you create the automata and then you run through the automata to find out whether it is accepted or not. Yes, I shared my screen of Pranay. I'm not showing anything. Okay, I'll come to that. Is that true? Is that correct? Absolutely, Mamtu. You have to pass through the DFA. If it passes through, then it is actually generated by the regular expression. The reason why you have to use the finite automata is because you know that regular expressions and finite automata are equivalent, right? All of you agree?
Yes, sir.
No, you are only agreeing. Anybody else? Anybody wants to disagree with me? Is there any disagreement? Okay, so you all agree that regular expressions and finite automata are equivalent, right? Now, who will tell me, how can you prove one way, like you can, regular expression can be converted into a finite automata? Who can tell me how to do that? Hello? These are fundamental questions. Yes, somebody, shall I mention clearly?
Sorry, sir. Actually, I was having some issue with
No,
my
not
laptop.
a problem. I'll repeat the question. We are all agreeing that regular expressions and finite automata are equivalent. That means
Yes.
there is a two-way relationship. Regular expression implies finite automata and finite automata implies regular expression. I'm asking the first question. RDs can be converted into finite automata. How?
Sir, from RE we can generate epsilon NFA, and from epsilon NFA then NFA then DFA.
Okay, give me one step. Like, give me one example how you do that. Like, take one regular expression and tell me how to do that.
So
Like A or B.
A plus B,
Right.
A plus B.
So how will you do that?
So we'll take one state, initial state, and put arrows A to another final state and B to another final state.
Fantastic.
Then,
so Shant,
if possible, then we'll minimize it.
Right. Absolutely. What Shantan said is absolutely what is the standard strategy. Like, for example, there are different constructs for regular expression, A plus B, or AB as concatenation, or A star. So for A plus B, you start from a state, then you have two transitions, one to a different state via A and one to a different state via B. So, and basically then you may try to optimize it, may try to first construct an equivalent DFA and then try to create the corresponding optimized DFA. Okay. Now that is absolutely true. This is true for A plus B. For AB, we know first there would be a transition to first state after A, and there would be another transition on B to the next state. And for A star, it is basically looping itself. Okay. So this is how you construct from any given regular expression, you construct the corresponding finite automata. And that is what exactly Flex does. Flex is nothing but a program which takes as input a set of regular expressions and creates the corresponding finite automata. Okay. Now, finite automata, you know, you can produce it in a diagrammatical manner, means you can create diagrams for that, or you can basically use a tabular approach. So in a programming environment, the second one is easy. So if you look into the output produced by Flex with a given input regular expression set, you will see that it produces a table where the transitions are defined for given inputs. That's it, nothing else.
Sir, Bison also do the same thing.
Pardon?
As Flex. Sir, Bison also do the same thing.
Bison is not for handling regular expression. I never said that. I'm saying Flex is for handling regular expressions. Okay. Because here we are talking about lexical analyzers. And lexical analyzers, as I said, is nothing but a way of handling patterns which are nothing but regular expressions. So from regular expression, we are creating the corresponding automata, and that is what Flex does. Bison does something else. We'll come to that. Okay. Okay, who will tell me how to create regular expression from finite automata, the other way around? Aditi, Pranay, Shayantan, you should not say, and Mamtu, you should not say. Somebody else. There are lots of people here. I want a response from everybody. Also, I'm not going to give you any attendance if you come later than 5 minutes. Okay, so that's what I have done already. I have taken the attendance. So first 25, 30 people have got the attendance. So try to be first. Yes. Anybody wants to venture into that? How to create a regular expression from a given finite automata? You have to remember, I'm not going to discuss this in class in much detail, but give you some assignments. In this particular course, you will learn a third way of creating the optimized DFA directly from a given regular expression. We'll come to that. And that's the approach actually taken by Flex. Instead of going through that epsilon NFA and then NFA to DFA and then DFA optimization. There is a straightforward way of doing this. I'll be discussing that later in the course, not immediately. Okay, so how to create regular expression out of a given finite automata? Who will tell me? What are the standard steps? Okay, in that case, I'll suggest you please read. Nobody has said anything. Okay, let me show you something else. Yes?
Sir, first step would be we keep on
No,
trying to minimize
Aditi, you
the
should not
state.
say. No, I know you have some understanding. I was asking for others. Somebody who are not really responding. Okay. Anyway, thanks. I have understood what you wanted to say. That's fine. Okay, let me continue with my lecture. Okay. So as you can see, the output of this lexical analyzer is basically a stream of tokens. Okay. A set of tokens, basically. Now, after the lexical analyzer comes the parser. I'm not going to go into the details of a parser construction here. We'll have enough time in our theoretical lectures later on. But look at what it does. We have already agreed in our earlier class that a parser basically creates a tree, a parse tree to be more precise. You have already seen that during your context-free grammar. Okay, Pranay, please note that parsers don't handle regular grammars, but they handle something called context-free grammars. Okay, so the syntax defined by
Okay,
the
sir.
programming-
Parser handle context free grammar.
Absolutely. Okay, that means it needs memory. That is the biggest thing. For regular expressions, you don't need memory. For handling a whole program to check whether it is syntactically correct or not, is basically you need a context-free grammar to specify it completely. Now, please note that in case of regular expressions or tokens, which are basically handled by the lexical analyzer phase, the only thing which is checked whether a particular lexeme belongs to any identifier or not. I mean, for example, in general in C, you cannot start an identifier with a numerical character. Okay, so if you start something with a numerical character, the lexical analyzer phase will say this is invalid syntax. Okay, whereas in case of a parser, the syntax of each and every statement or a group of statement is checked. So it is not the structure of a particular word is checked. It is the structure of a set of tokens which is checked, whether they correctly sit together properly. Like for example, here you can see, you can have a plus and then you can have identifiers on both sides. You can have a star and you can have identifiers on both sides. But this is what is known as an infix expression. But you can have different types of expressions like where identifiers come together followed by expressions, which is known as the postfix notation. So that is a different grammar. Here it is a different grammar. If you use a postfix notation here, it will throw a syntax error. Throw a syntax error. Okay. What is the output of the syntax analyzer? As you can see, it creates something called a parts tree. We'll have enough opportunity to find out how it is created in later classes. This is the intermediate code part. So note the difference between a parser and a syntax analyzer. Sorry, semantic analyzer. So ICG is part of semantic analysis. Parser is basically syntax analysis. So what is the difference between these two? Very important. We'll see in these examples. Like you are assigning 60 to temp1, you are assigning temp2 is id3 start temp1, then temp3 equal to id2 plus temp2, id1 is temp1. This is basically corresponding to the stream of token here, id1 equal to id2 plus id3 start 60. Okay, so how is it represented in a intermediate language? Why this particular expression is not possible in intermediate language? Because it is a complicated arithmetic expression. You know, machines can handle only binary arithmetic. Okay, so you have to flatten it. You have to modify it in such a manner that the meaning of it is not changed. Means it is actually calculating what it is supposed to do, but not in a complicated manner as is shown in this expression. So how? So what we can do is we can first do a multiply between 60 and the identifier 3 and put it into a temporary variable. These temporaries, you will see, play a big role in intermediate code. So you can create temporaries at will, and you can assign some expressions into that. Expressions means binary expressions, as you can see. id3 start temp1. Then you do the addition, id2 plus temp2. And then you assign it to id1. So you can see here only one statement is there, a high-level language statement, which is converted into an intermediate code, which is very close to the machine language, and it takes 4 separate statements to do that job. This is what the job of an intermediate code generator is. We'll see how it is done. Now you can see what is a code generator. So intermediate code generator generates an intermediate representation. It is an abstract notation. No programming language in the world supports these. But here you can see this is a machine language or an assembly form for some machine, target machine, where there is a move instruction, there is a multiply instruction, there is an add instruction. Each of them are binary operation.
Sir,
of
what is CG and ICG?
CG is basically the generated machine code, and ICG is the intermediate code. That's what I wanted to say.
Okay.
And this is your high-level language, ID equal to ID plus ID star 60. This is not supported in any machine language. So ICG converts that into something which can be easily converted, readily converted into machine language. So from ICG to CG, it's almost a one-to-one translation. Okay, but actual translation has to be done. Like instead of assignment, it is a move statement. Instead of multiply, instead of start, it is a multiply statement like this. Okay, so ICG is generic, abstract. Nobody implements it, but it needs to be there so that it can be easily translated into a target machine when you are moving your compiler from one platform to another. Got my point? So as you can understand, up to ICG, most of the compilers are already written. They don't need to change. These are the front ends. But the later part, the backend part, code generation needs to change depending on the architecture. Today you have ARM 7. Next day you might be having RISC-V. Next day you might be having something else. Okay. So for each of these target architectures, you need to have your own code generator, which will map from the intermediate code into the corresponding machine code. All right. Another important thing here is that use of registers. Intermediate code doesn't use registers. Here, actual mapping of variables into registers are shown clearly. What are the cousins of compilers? Preprocessor. All of you know what is a preprocessor. Yes. Any answer? What is a preprocessor? Give me an example.
Macros.
Yes.
Macros.
Hash
Sir, has
include.
include IOStream.
Yes. Hash defines. These are all macros. Okay. Then
Sir,
there is
using names. Sir, using namespace.
Namespace, I'm not sure. Okay. I'm not going to go into C++ in this discussion much. Okay. Sorry about that. I mean, we can generate C++ code, but we are not really compiling C++ code in our course. Okay. Maybe, may not be. I'll come to that. Okay. Assemblers. I think all of you know what is an assembler. What is an assembler?
Generates machine language code from the assembly language code.
Correct. So there is an assembly language. So you have seen 8085 programming. None of them was in machine code because machine codes are difficult to remember, whereas assembly code has mnemonics which are easy to remember, has some meaning, but they with reference to what they are doing, intended to be done. And you have loaders and linkers. What is does loader come first or linker come first? Who can tell me? Very interesting question.
Loader, sir.
So loaders come first, and then
Yes, sir.
and then linker comes. Okay.
Yes,
What
sir.
is the difference? What is the difference between these two?
So basically, loader loads the program into the main memory,
Right.
and a linker links the link to the associated code.
Correct. So linker, the task of a linker is to find out, for example, if you are using a library function, say, I don't know, square root, sqrt in C. So sqrt may be defined in a library which is outside your main program. So it find out that it is the task of the linker to make sure that the appropriate code is available with your program and it is executed. Okay, that's what it is. So linker specifies the pointer. Linker is basically having the objective of filling the blanks of these external function calls, for example, or it can be variables which are declared externally. Okay, that is the task of a linker. So does linker come first or loader come first? To my to my vision, linker comes first, right? Because you have to first find out the positions where these external functions are available, and then only you can try executing them, right? Isn't it true?
Yes, sir.
Then why is Pranay saying loading is first and linking second? This is actually correct. What you are saying is, I am not saying wrong. Okay, let me explain the thing. In software tools, you might have come across this. There is something called static linking and dynamic linking, or static library and dynamic library. Have you heard these terms?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes. So, what is the difference? Somebody else. Lot of answers are given by Pranay and Shayantan and others and Mamtu. Somebody else. Let me see. What is a static linking and what is a dynamic linking?
So basically, static linking done compile time and dynamic in the runtime.
Okay. So,
So copy of the library in linking phase, a copy of all the libraries is bought inside the code, and sometimes it is not bought inside the code.
correct. Okay. We assume that in static linking, in general, the corresponding object code, which is available in the external library, is actually bound with the program and the executable is created. That's why there is a difference between object file and executable file. We all know that. Like if we do gcc space -c, then the file name .c, it creates an object file, but you cannot run it. You have to link it with the corresponding library to make it an executable, and then you can run it. This is the static linking concept. The problem is that you are writing a, I don't know, 10K code, and you are actually linking 10 megabyte of libraries. Is that very good? Yes. As Mamtu said, very good. Excellent, Mamtu. So Mamtu is giving the right thing. In static linking, entire code is copied in our program. In dynamic, it is not like that. So in dynamic, the code is just a pointer. So if you load the program, then it will be looking for that particular library only when the need comes during runtime. Okay, so this is basically the concept of shared library or dynamic library. Okay, so the problem here is that if you are using static linking, you can ship your code without any presumption on the target architecture. Okay, but if you are shipping your code with dynamic linking facility, then those shared libraries need to be present. Dynamic libraries need to be present in the target machine. So installation is more difficult. Okay, that kind of thing. But the beauty is that the code you are shipping is much, much smaller. Maybe 10 times or even 1%, 10% or 1% of what you had to do with static linking. Okay, today nobody does static linking, but believe me or not, when I started my career like almost 25 years back, more than that, we didn't know what is what is dynamic linking. We only had static linking, so you to ship our customers very big files. Nowadays, with internet is there, you don't need that. Okay, and of course you understood how to put the shared libraries and what to do with the LD library path or things like that. So I don't want to discuss them anymore. So yes, you have to load it first today, and then only it is linked because it's all dynamic linking. Am I right? Anybody wants to disagree? Please do it now. Anybody has some doubt? I can see lots of faces. Nobody is interacting apart from a group. It's not good. Anyway, so loaders and linkers. Now, there are tools to generate compilers. We already have talked about Flex. We have already talked about a little bit of Bison. Bison is a parser generator. That means in Bison, you give a set of context-free grammar and the corresponding rules will be generated to handle that particular grammar. Okay. Now, to handle context-free grammar, what kind of thing we need? I think I discussed this. We need a push-down automata. So basically, you need, what is a push-down automata? Who can tell me? Push-down automata consists of two things. Can you tell me what are those two things?
Sir, forgotten, sir.
Okay, I'll tell you. Push-down automata is nothing but a combination of a finite automata. Mamtu, that is very much there. So finite automata, you can think of push-down automata as a finite automata with memory in it. And what kind of memory? For convenience, for ease of use, it is generally stack. So you can say that a finite automata with stack as memory is basically your push-down automata. So when I say that I need to generate the parser from a given set of context-free grammar, we are basically generating the push-down automata. That means we are essentially creating states in the finite automata again in a tabular form, and then something else is there where we are specifying the stack. That I'll explain as we go forward. So parser generators exactly does the thing. So you will be generating by hand from a given context-free grammar the corresponding stack handling procedure and the corresponding rules. But Bison does that for you. So this is a tool which eases your efforts. There is other type of tool which is known as compiler, for example, or cross compiler. For example, suppose you want to write a Python compiler. Okay. So what would be the input to your system? Let me show you clearly. So what you want to do is you are writing a Python compiler. So this is MyPy. This program is a Python compiler, MyPy.
Sir, we cannot say anything.
Yes, I'll show you right now. So I want to write MyPy. This is a compiler I am writing, which will compile Python languages. What should I do? What would be the input to this? What would be the input to this? Yes? What would be input to MyPy? Who can tell me? What should I give as input to MyPy? The input is nothing but a dot py. That is my program, a program I have written in Python, or anybody has written a program in Python, some file. So you are writing in Python, and this is the compiler you have, which is supposed to generate the machine language. Say Intel. Okay, so Intel architecture machine code, it generates. Now, how will you write MyPy? What is the language you will choose? You might not have any Python compiler on your machine. That's why you are writing MyPy. But what kind of compiler you might be having? You might be having GCC. GCC may be there.
Yes, sir, easy.
So if you have GCC, you can write your compiler in C, right?
Yes, sir.
GCC handles C. So you are writing MyPy. It's a project which consists only of .c files.
Yes,
So
sir.
basically, using .c files, you are creating a compiler which can compile Python code. This is basically a compiler or a cross compiler. So you can understand all of the things we do in real life is basically cross compiler. But things were not like that. Who developed the first compiler? Like the first compiler was high-level language compiler was a Python Fortran compiler. So that was not so easy to write. You can understand because there was no language support on that machine. It was the first compiler, so you didn't have any support of another compiler. So Fortran compiler had to be written in machine language. Okay, you can understand. But once the Fortran compiler was available, you could write any language compiler in Fortran because now the compiler was available, and from then onward it becomes really easy. So once the first high-level language compiler is available, you can create infinite number of high-level language compilers using this cross-compiler concept, right?
Sir, one
got the-
article I read that Python compiler is developed by C.
Yes, of course. Most of the Python compilers are either C or C++. Yes. Nowadays, maybe Java. In fact, that you can easily find out once you install a Python compiler. If you look into the source code, you will see what are the extension of those files. Most of them are .c in general. But then now a Python compiler is available also. There are lots of Python compiler available. So you can create your own Python compiler using Python language. Okay. Now, while you do that, you might not be interested in some of the features in the existing Python compiler. You want to make it faster, for example. So instead of digging through their code, you write your own Python compiler. It's not that big a hurdle. A team of 2-3 persons can do it within a few months.
Sir, Java is written in which language? JVSC?
C.
You know?
Yes. Or C or C++. I think it is written in C++. You want to hear the story of that, and then I will drop off today. I have already taken the attendance. Okay, so in 1995, beginning of 1995, that was the heyday of Sun Microsystems. Okay, I think all of you know who is Sun Microsystem, right?
Sir, actually, yeah, sir, Satya Nadella, who had worked at first in that company, I think.
Yeah, in those days there was no Satya Nadella. In those days there are people like Bill Joy or Scott McClellan or this guy James Gosling, okay, and Peter Norton. Okay, so these two persons, they worked in Sun Microsystems, and it was their like prime time in the mid 90s. Sun Microsystem had prime time in the early 80s to late 90s. So for 20 years or so. Then the sun got set. Okay, the sunset, you can say. The sunset happened. Now, these two persons, they were very smart people. And they were not working on really good projects. So they were really unhappy. So these two persons said, okay, went to their project manager in the beginning of January. They had a good conversation in the winter break among themselves. Like, we don't want to do all this crap. We'll go to our project manager and say something. So in the beginning of January 1995, they went to their project manager and said, okay, see, we are really unhappy with our work, but we 2-3 persons have decided that we'll create our own language. C++ is really cumbersome. It has lots of unsafe features. It's not really portable. It's complex. Then it is very much machine dependent. So we want to make a language which is simple to code, which will be portable across environments, where compilation can be on the fly. So an intermediate code was sufficient. It will not be bulky. The design of the compiler would be rather simple. The language features will not be so powerful as C++, but they'll be good enough for ordinary programmers. I mean, user programmers, not power programmers, but those who can code a bit to get their things running. In those times, internet was also coming. So in 1995, there was no real publication of internet, but late 1995, everybody jumped into the internet. Okay, within a 1 year, the whole world changed. Netscape came, Xmosaic came, those web browsers came. So World Wide Web was there for quite some time, but people never thought internet could be built on it and used. So Java and internet actually started growing up during the same time, simultaneously. And by the end of 1995, these people are done with the Java compiler. 2-3 people, actually 2 people worked on it mainly. So they had their first Java beta version ready, Java 0.6 or something like that. Beginning of 1996, they started shipping it. Okay, and that's how it came. And in those times, C++ was the most widely used language. So they used that actually. But then look what they came up with. And in last 25 years or so, Java has become the choice for many platforms. Although I think it's still quite heavy compared to what we have today, like Python or PHP. Does that answer your question a little bit, Pranay? Is it a nice story?
Yes, sir.
Is it a
Sir,
nice story?
actually, yes, sir. Sir, actually, who is the founder? Sun Microsystem or Oracle? Who is the founder of Java?
No, Sun Microsystem. But then it got bought by Oracle, I think in around 2010 timeframe, something like that. So you guys don't know the history. So you guys only see Oracle as the creator of Java. But yes, Sun Microsystem, which was a very good company, was the creator. Okay. Sun and Oracle are actually, they have their main, I mean, in those days, these kind of like global campuses were not available. So campuses were like nearby to each other. So Sun and Oracle were right next to each other in the Silicon Valley. In America, of course. Okay. So those were glorious days. Anyway, yes. Any more question?
No, sir.
Okay. So yeah, after Java came, people became really interested in compilers, and you won't believe every year 300 language compilers are created in America alone. Like new languages are coming. Only some of them survive. You have seen C surviving, but there are A, B as well. And none of them survived. Okay. So that's about it. Okay. I'll leave here. So we'll have our next class after the puja break. I'll let you know about the exact date. So till then, have a good break, good vacation, enjoy your vacation, and
Yes, sir. Happy Puja.
Happy puja. And I'll keep you sending materials after materials during this time frame, so that when we meet next, we know what exactly we are going to do in much more detail, and we'll go to the details in those classes. Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Sir.
You can.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, sure.